Good evening. And on behalf of the Eastern Iowa Heroin Initiative, U.S. Attorney's Office, and Mercy Medical Center, I would like to welcome you to tonight's town hall meeting, Prescription Painkillers and the Heroin Epidemic, a National Challenge, a Community Solution. Unfortunately, every person in this room has somehow been affected by this disease, and some have paid the highest price. We commend you all for being a part of the conversation and the solution. We have many expert presenters this evening, and we have built in time for a question and answer period. But before we start, I would like to take a moment to ask you to please turn off your pagers and cell phones. So we will open with Kevin Tecco, the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Iowa.
Thank you. Good evening. It's a wonderful opportunity to bring all of you together to talk about a very important issue. As the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Northern District of Iowa, we work every day with our law enforcement partners, and I want to recognize the Dubuque Police Department and the police and the Dubuque County Sheriff's Department as well. Chief Deputy Greg Egan is here representing the sheriff. So Greg, where are you? Yep, there he is. We have an excellent drug task force here in the Dubuque area, led by the DEA and then with the state D&E as well, working with local law enforcement. Opioid-related overdoses have become a national epidemic and a major health crisis. Many parts of the United States are in a full-blown epidemic. In Iowa, and in particular northeast Iowa, we're at the beginning of a similar crisis. So why is the U.S. Attorney from the Northern District of Iowa here? Because we need to sound the alarm. Today, our children, grandchildren, friends, and neighbors are abusing prescription drugs. Don't kid yourself if you think the pills to heroin epidemic is not going to come to your home, your neighborhood, your family member, or even your churches. This problem does not begin on the street or in prison. More often than not, it begins at home, even in the homes of those closest to us. More than half of all prescription drug abusers first obtain pills from friends or family, often by raiding the family medicine cabinet, and no one should think that the size of their wallet or the size of their home is going to shield them from this problem. Our law enforcement agencies are a critical part of the opioid solution. However, we cannot arrest our way out of this epidemic. While we need to ensure access to pain medication for individuals with chronic pain, we need to reduce opportunities for individuals to access and use opioids for non-medical purposes. We need to build upon and accelerate the prevention, intervention, and treatment recovery support strategies that have been proven effective throughout the United States. We have an opportunity to prevent this from growing worse if action is taken. This demands a 360-degree solution. We have increased the number of community impact prosecutions targeting trafficking organizations in eastern Iowa, and we have collaborated with our law enforcement components locally, nationally, and internationally to stem the supply. But to reduce overdose, we need to recognize that addiction is an illness that can be treated, and to do so, we must eliminate the stigma surrounding substance abuse and seeking treatment. We need to expand public awareness, provider, and education, the elimination of shame and secrecy surrounding drug addiction, the provision of better treatment for those suffering with addictions, and better measurement and assessment and accountability to inform decision making. Our response requires a strong partnership between the medical community, law enforcement, the judiciary, insurers, providers, health and human services agencies, elected officials, and the public. There are no easy or quick solutions. Nothing short of a comprehensive approach to this opioid epidemic will turn the tide of overdose deaths and reduce the harms that opioids are inflicting upon individuals, families, and our communities. We're proud to partner with all those that have put this program on today. Prevention and treatment need to be stepped up across the United States, and we have a real opportunity here in eastern Iowa and in your community to make a real impact. So we have some very outstanding presenters that are going to facilitate this conversation. We know we work best when we work together, federal, state, and local law enforcement, along with community groups and community members like yourself. So thank you for coming out today and taking a hard look at this problem. I know we can do better, and prevent tragedies in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next speaker is Al Fear, coordinator for the Eastern Iowa Heroin Initiative.
Okay, the day is finally here, finally. And for all of you on Facebook who have been annoyed by my posts, I'm sorry. I'm very excited for this event, so you'll be getting updates about every 15, 20 minutes, and I'm just excited to be here. So, my name is Al Fear, the Cedar Rapids Police Department, currently assigned to the United States Attorney's Office and the Eastern Iowa Heroin Initiative. So, dear friend of ours, Vicki Allendorf, who was scheduled to speak tonight, she will not be here. Two of her sons died on Saturday. I'd like to take a moment of silence, please, not only for these two boys here, but for all the people who have become victim because of heroin. Thank you. Okay, Vicki's table, I Hate Heroin, is out in the hallway there. Todd, her boyfriend, is here, manning the booth, and he's out there to answer any questions. His banner alone is just a huge talking point for all the families that Vicki has helped over the years. Vicki has close to 160,000 followers nationwide on her I Hate Heroin Facebook page. So if you're not on it, go ahead and find it tonight and get on that page. So anyway, what is the Eastern Iowa Heroin Initiative? It's 3 parts. It's involving treatment, prevention, and prosecution. My job is primarily the prevention and the treatment portion. I go out and do several things. Maybe. There we go. Prescription painkiller and heroin awareness programs, community action organizational efforts, first responder training, investigative case development to target sources of supply for federal prosecution. Obviously, town hall meetings. Here we are. Public awareness campaigns, work closely with substance abuse and healthcare providers and state legislation. One of the things I'm most proud of is this one right here. July 1st, just got signed by the governor for naloxone here in the state of Iowa. This is a huge step forward. Now we'll be able to save more lives with this drug here. It's going to be allowed for first responders and family and friends to get a prescription from a doctor if your loved one is suffering from substance abuse. What are opioids? Vicodin, Oxycontin, fentanyl, Percocet, oxycodone, codeine, morphine, and of course heroin. And naloxone or Narcan will help reverse all of these here. It's a huge ally for us to have. This book here is called Dreamland. It's by Sam Kionis. Back in November last year, we had a heroin summit in Iowa City, and he was the guest speaker. It's a great book if you have a chance to get it. It's called Dreamland. It talks about the opioid problem in the United States, how it started, and all the way to the current problem we're having with the heroin epidemic. Just to kind of give you some highlights, back in 1986, doctors were told that opiates are not addictive. That's what the doctors were told in their training. 1998, the pain was the 5th vital sign. And that's when you started seeing these little guys here in the bottom at your doctor's offices to rate your pain scale. In the 2000s, physicians have now been, were getting rated on whether or not their patients had pain. If you go to your doctor's office, if you leave still saying you have pain, that doctor got rated lower than the doctor who provided the painkillers for their patients to be pain-free. 2010 to the present, obviously the opioid overdose, over-prescription issues that we're having, and the heroin epidemic. I'm a very visual person. I found this when I was looking for new slides for my presentation. Basically goes through the mind process here. A normal balance all the way to the left, you have all your life's issues. Food, television, school, kids, reading, sleep, and opioids. Opioids are just a small issue that you're thinking of. Toward the middle, increased tolerance and preoccupation. Opioids are starting to take over your brain a little bit more, and the rest of your life is taking a second. The last picture is the overpowering addiction, where that's all you're thinking about are the opioids. Opioid painkillers work by binding the opioid receptors in the brain. They reduce the sending of pain signals to the brain and reduce the feelings of pain. Some of the signs of opioid addiction: usage increase, change in personality, social withdrawal, ongoing use, time spent to obtain these prescriptions, change in daily habits, neglecting responsibilities, increased sensitivity, blackouts and forgetfulness, and defensiveness. I need to add that in this room, we have such a wide variety of backgrounds. There are people here who are just now hearing about this heroin issue for the first time. There are people in this room who are currently suffering from substance abuse. There are people here who have lost loved ones and are still grieving, going through this process. So our job up here tonight is to not only educate you on what's going on in the Dubuque area, but to hopefully, by the end of this night, is to provide some hope, to let you know what resources we have in the area, what resources are coming, what programs and efforts we're making on this side to make things happen for you and your community. This is a slide that was showing earlier, and it basically talks about addiction, and if you're using one thing, how apt are you to be addicted to heroin. On the far right, if you are addicted to opioid painkillers, you're 40 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. Medical staff training, this is some things that I do here, the physician challenge, overprescribing practices of doctors. Is it an issue? Absolutely, it is. Think about the last time you hurt your arm, broke a leg, whatever it was, and you went to the doctor and you got prescribed painkillers. How long did you use those painkillers? Maybe 3 or 4 days, and then you had a whole bottle left over. What happens to those medications? They stay in your medicine cabinet. Kids get kind of curious. Everyone here, so I'm sure, heard of the pill parties or the Skittle parties in the schools. If not, we can talk about it a little bit later. There are new CDC guidelines to direct the doctors as far as how much painkillers to prescribe, which is great, and hopefully we're on the step in the right direction. The use of the state monitoring program, the PMP. Currently in the state of Iowa, we do have a PMP in place. However, it is not required for doctors to use it, which honestly I don't understand. I don't get that part, and it frustrates me. We have doctor shopping happening all over the place. Somebody can go to Dr. A, B, C, and D, say their back hurts, get prescribed hydrocodone, Oxycontin, and nobody questions it. If you use the PMP, at least you'd have the opportunity to talk to each other and find out what's going on and hopefully stop the doctor shopping. Currently, 44% of doctors in the state of Iowa are registered to use the PMP. That does not mean that that's how many people are using it, but that's how many people are registered to use it. So my goal is to obviously get that up to 95 to 100% of doctors be registered for the PMP and actually using the process to hopefully stop the doctor shopping. Goals: to work with healthcare professionals in Dubuque to establish a basic standard of care for addiction and withdrawal treatment. People who are suffering from addiction deserve a basic standard of care, just like patients with HIV or cancer. They deserve access to effective medication along with the same compassion and understanding. And I'm not going to lie to you, I stole that from Vicki. That last part there where this heroin epidemic, it's no different than HIV or cancer. It's a medical issue. It's not a law enforcement issue. I've been in law enforcement for 21 years now. And another part of my job is to go out and train law enforcement agencies to make them understand that putting the same person back in jail over and over again does nothing. We need to get them out of the jail. Thank you. We need to keep them out of the jail system and on the road to recovery. So that's my mission, is to go out to local law enforcement and train them up. And Pat Reiner and I, we travel throughout eastern Iowa and we train all the different law enforcement agencies. To establish a Dubuque community action team trained to respond to overdose cases and provide detailed information to the victims and family on recovery options. Family support, heroin opioid resource for parents, recovery team, prevention and awareness campaigns. And I know people in here are frustrated with the resources in Dubuque. There's hardly anything here. I'm shocked of the need that is here for resources. So believe me, it's a fight that we're fighting right now. And we're having some good conversations with the people that make the decisions. This last week, Vicki, myself, Sue, we had meetings with the CEO of Mercy Medical Center here in Dubuque and also the chief nursing officer at Finley Hospital. So I know it's easier for me to stand up here and say this, but it's coming. We're making steps in the right direction. We're having the good conversations. I'm tired of hearing stories of people being turned away from the ER. And this is the last one, is to work closely with law enforcement to provide latest training in heroin-related crime and investigative techniques. Currently, the Dubuque Drug Task Force is getting hammered with calls. They're working their butts off, believe it or not. They're doing a great job. But they just have their finger in the dike. You know, they're just holding it back. And they need probably twice as many, if not 3 times as many guys in their unit to keep up with what's going on currently in Dubuque. So hats off to the Dubuque Task Force guys. Thank you very much. We're not here to wrest our way through the problem. We are here to help those who are suffering from substance abuse and find the road to recovery. And yes, I'm going to push my Facebook page. So I don't know how many people are in here, maybe 500, 600. Just awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much for everybody for coming. Give it a hand. Give yourself a hand for that. When we originally scheduled this, we had a room that would seat 100 people. And we were worried about getting 10 people to show up. So this is amazing. That's my information. My business cards are back on the Helping Services for Northeast Iowa table and also the I Hate Heroin page. And I'll be back up for the question and answer session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Al. Speaking about the challenges and local trends is Patrick Reinert, Assistant U.S. Attorney, Northern District of Iowa.
Yeah, Al always likes to push his Facebook page. Do you get like a nickel a click or something? Is it? Okay. We're getting this pulled up here. I'm Pat Reinert. I'm an Assistant U.S. Attorney. I'm the Deputy Drug Chief. I've been doing narcotics prosecutions primarily for the last quarter century or so with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Worked a lot with the Dubuque Drug Task Force, the Blackhawk County, the Tri-County Drug Task Force, DEA and HSI and all the federal agencies. And one of the things that we do in the federal arena is try and bring federal tools to help local law enforcement deal with their problems. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is kind of the scope of the problem that we have with heroin and opioids and give you some of the statistics here in eastern Iowa. One of the things you'll see in the statistics is opioid addiction and heroin cuts across all demographics, all ages, all races, creeds, colors, and religions. Many of our opioid abuse challenges start with legitimate injury. If you look at 80% of all people who use heroin have started using an opioid by using a prescription medication. Now, it could be a prescription medication they started using recreationally that they had stolen from a medicine cabinet, or it could be what they got from a legitimate injury. From talking to witnesses that we have that are users of controlled substances, many of them started with a legitimate injury, whether it's getting hurt at John Deere or some other factory, coming back to work too fast, getting too much pain medication. These are the just prescription drug arrests in Cedar Rapids only. 150% increase in 5 years, so there's lots and lots of pills on the street. The vast majority of the pills that are being picked up on these arrests are, or seizures are, opioid pills, Vicodins, Lortabs, things like that. ASAC, which is the substance abuse treatment in Cedar Rapids, in 7 years, a 300% increase in people reporting that prescription pills are their primary, secondary, or tertiary abuse medium. So pills are on the rise. And when you look at a pill problem, when you've got opioid pills on the street and you see an uptick in that, heroin will soon follow. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Accessibility is a huge issue when you deal with opioids. If they're in your medicine cabinet, that's the challenge. Most children that have stolen, that have gotten opioid pain medication, steal it from home, steal it from the medicine cabinets. It almost always starts with the painkiller, and then you get to some of it, hey, I'm a big guy, I might need to take 2, or one worked, 2 will work better. Or you start doubling up on the pain medication to get that same euphoric effect. Once that happens, you start building the tolerance. As the tolerance builds, so does the dosage necessary to get to that same level of high. And then the prescription runs out, and it's too expensive to buy it on the street. Prescription pills on the street are expensive. An OxyContin might go for $80, and a person may have to take 3, 4, 5, 6 of those a day. With that kind of cost, it's frequent that it will turn to heroin, which is a cheaper, albeit much more dangerous substance. Everything is measured in the pain world in morphine. Morphine is kind of the standard for pain blocking. Heroin is at least 3 times more potent than morphine. Heroin is a salt that can be used in any way. It can be eaten, it can be smoked, it can be injected, it can be any way you can think about it. And the way a heroin user uses it, usually most of our heroin looks like that, kind of a tannish powder. Generally comes from Mexico, Afghanistan. Afghan heroin is generally not a problem in the United States. That's generally a problem in Europe and Russia. Most of our heroin comes from Mexico. A very small amount there, about 1/10 of a gram. For a heroin dose is put there, mixed with water, heated, pulled up into a syringe, and then injected is the most common way. When you look at, since you could use it in a number of substances, the way you use it affects the way it affects you. So if someone snorts it, it takes much longer to get high than if someone injects. The injection 7 to 8 seconds to get full effect if it's heroin. If it's a stronger version like a fentanyl or something that's even stronger than heroin, it can take effect much faster than that. Heroin in pill form, they're starting to see this more on the East Coast. My guess is it will come. Anything that sells or works for the cartels to make money will work. So I would expect we'll see something like this, and that's just heroin pressed into a pill, and it can be a pill in any shape, color, form, anything else. It's just an easier way to get it ingested. Once heroin is used, or any kind of opioid, you're going to have that endorphin rush. It's going to be sleepy. It's going to be pain relief. It also affects the central nervous system as a depressant. Breathing becomes harder. Your heart has to pump harder. As your heart succumbs and your respiratory system succumbs to the heroin or the opioid, it becomes harder and harder to push that blood back out into the extremities, into your arms and legs. And heroin users generally, if they die, in essence, drowned in their own fluids. If someone overdoses and the EMT arrives and they're able to take the oxygen saturation levels, what should be in a normal person, 90 to 100% saturation, many of these folks who have overdosed are down in the 30% level before we can bring them back with Narcan. Once someone starts using an opioid, initially it's kind of an every now and then kind of thing, maybe a once a week kind of thing. Once it progresses into a daily kind of thing, the heroin user or the opioid user is not doing it to get high anymore. They're doing it to avoid this. These are the symptoms of opioid withdrawal. So if someone has become addicted to an opioid and they don't get it, and by meaning don't get it like don't get it once or twice a day, because the withdrawals can hit you twice a day, it wears off, heroin will wear off in about 8 hours. I've had it described to me as, think about having the flu. Not only the stomach flu, but the intestinal flu and any kind of flu you can think about having all at once for 2 weeks straight, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For those 2 weeks. That is the withdrawal from heroin. If an opioid is given to someone who is suffering from that withdrawal, within about 3 minutes, all of those symptoms are gone. That's the draw of heroin once the addiction takes hold. We talked a little bit about it doesn't discriminate against race, creed, or color. These are the statistics from 2000 and 2013. The blue is 2000 and 2013. It's up in every demographic, every age group, non-Hispanic, Hispanic, you name it. By region, these are heroin deaths by region. The Northeast has always had a bit of a heroin challenge, mostly from South America and Chinese. They had some heroin from Southeast Asia as well. They've always had a bit more than everyone else in the country. But even now, in 2013, their numbers are quadrupled. But look at the rate of change in the Midwest. The rate of change where now the Midwest surpasses the Northeast. It's exponentially worse here because of the rate of change, and we have to keep up with it. Our healthcare providers, our substance abuse treatment people, and the police, we have to keep up with this new challenge. Since 2000, deaths related to opioids have increased 1,000% in the state. And this isn't across the state uniformly. The vast bulk of opioid deaths have occurred in eastern Iowa. Lynn, Johnson, Scott, Dubuque, Blackhawk, and Polk are those are the leading counties in the state. This is what we have on statistics in Cedar Rapids. We kind of knew the death number. That was a number we actually could calculate pretty well from the medical examiner's office. We knew the calls for service to the police because in Cedar Rapids we have a response where the EMS, the Lynn County Area Ambulance, would come out along with the police. So we knew the numbers of people calling 911 to get a response. What we didn't know was what was going on at the hospitals. So we asked. So this is in 2015, with 20 deaths, we had 330 hospital admissions for opioids. In Dubuque, 2012, you had 23 overdose calls. Now the numbers are going down here. Part of that could be a reliance upon private ambulance services or other ways to get to the hospital to try and avoid law enforcement involvement. So that's a moving number. But your death numbers, 0 in 2012, 1 in 13 and 14, 6 in 15, and you've had 5 already in April this year. And you had 0 as of 1 March. So you had 5 in the last month here in Dubuque. Much of the heroin we're seeing now, or what's been sold on the street as heroin, is not heroin. A lot of it is fentanyl. Fentanyl is a very strong, it's 35 times more potent than heroin. So if an average dose of heroin would be 1/10 of a gram, you need to visualize this. Take a sugar packet and chop it up into 10 lines. That's about 1/10 of a gram. A sugar packet's a gram. You take one of those little 1/10 of a gram lines and chop it up into 100 lines. A fatal dose of fentanyl is 1/1000th of a gram. Much of what's being sold on the street, what we had in a recent trial, what was sold as heroin, or what some folks called strong heroin, was in fact either heroin mixed with fentanyl or pure fentanyl. Fentanyl is manufactured frequently in clandestine labs in Mexico. You can manufacture it in a lab setting. It's all synthetic. There's no plant base to it, so you don't have to grow opium poppies. You don't have to hire a guy out to score it with a razor blade. You don't have to collect the sap. You don't have to cook it. You don't have to do all of that manufacturing process. It's all synthetically made, much like making methamphetamine in a clandestine lab. So that's why the cartels in Mexico are going the fentanyl route instead of doing more opium poppy. Although last year Mexico planted more hectares of opium poppy than they did marijuana. This is a fentanyl patch. You frequently have those in people who have severe pain, end-of-life, terminal cancer patients, things of that nature. And this is really kind of how the cycle works with opiate use. They may start with kind of an opiate, maybe a prescription drug, maybe a recreational use, a pill every now and then. The use will become more and more regular, from once a week or once a month to daily. Once it becomes daily, the individual really is not at that point looking at the endorphin or the euphoric effect of the use. They are really using to avoid the withdrawals. It is a daily habit. Once that becomes a daily habit, you can get treatment, but treatment in opioid addiction, because of the challenge of going to treatment for a few days, being really sick with the withdrawals, it is not uncommon for people to have problems getting through a treatment. So they're going to recycle treatment. And you are 10 times more likely to die within 10 days of being clean. So if you get out of jail, you go through treatment and you're clean for a while, you're more likely to die at that point because your tolerance to the opiate is gone. So that's the population that's at risk. But ultimately, there's only two ways out: recovery or death. And what are the costs associated with heroin? We talked about heroin being a cheaper substitute for pills, and it is. But you're talking about $20 to $30 for 1/10 of a gram. You're going to use once or twice a day. That's going to be $150 to $200 a day. Heroin does not take holidays and weekends off. No federal holidays, no post office days off, nothing. So every day, like clockwork. So it's a $100, $200 a day habit. That's $700 to $1,400 a week for heroin. $36,000 to $70,000 a year just for heroin. So how is this paid for? Who pays for all that? All of us. Many times the user originally will have kind of a regular job. Ultimately, that regular job will be too much of a challenge to deal with. Once the addiction really takes hold and it becomes a daily habit, regular jobs don't pay enough, take too much time out of the day, and it just becomes too much of a challenge. So other means have to be used. Bank accounts will be depleted. I've talked to parents of people who are suffering from addiction, and the silverware has to be locked up in the safe when the kids come over. Everything can be stolen and used. Property crimes, virtually all the witnesses we've had in our heroin cases, all of them will have a property crime conviction of some sort. Thefts, shoplifting is a big one, especially shoplifting at stores that will take things back without receipts. So you can walk out one door with stealing something from a particular store and walk back in the next door and return it and get cash. Financial frauds, EBT frauds. We have a lot of EBT cards that we seize in drug search warrants. So we'll do a search warrant on a heroin trafficker's house, and he will have an EBT card with with lots of EBT cards with other people's names on it. And that the person who is addicted to the opiate will give that to the user along with a PIN number, and then the dealer can just go buy whatever they want with the EBT card. And the other person just gets heroin out of it. So I've always asked the officers to take pictures of what's in the refrigerator too, because there's always lots of great steaks and stuff in the refrigerator in those houses. Pseudoephedrine, methamphetamine manufacturing is still a challenge in the state. So buying pseudoephedrine, since you're limited to 3.5 grams a month, getting more and more people to buy pseudo to get into the methamphetamine. So a heroin user may use their 3.5 grams that they're allowed to buy in a month, go buy the pseudoephedrine, and then sell the pseudoephedrine to someone so they can manufacture meth and they can get the money to buy heroin. A lot of drug crimes, a lot of middling deals to help set up, because drug trafficking is an insular crime. Drug dealers don't generally deal with someone that they don't know. It's usually a set customer base that they'll go through, and they expand it very slowly by word of mouth. So if someone knows a particular dealer, a user may come to a friend and say, hey, can you hook me up with so-and-so to try and get heroin? My regular guy is out. So heroin dealers will always trade customers back and forth. It's just kind of the way the networks have evolved. And unfortunately, a lot of our heroin users, young females especially, will have offers of sexual exploitation in exchange for heroin. So that's kind of the scope of the problem that we as a community in eastern Iowa have, both in Cedar Rapids as well as in Dubuque. And we're trying to kind of get ahead of it, both with prevention efforts, treatment efforts, and still doing prosecution and investigative efforts to try and stay ahead of it. So thank you all for coming tonight, and I hope I didn't, bum you out.
Thank you, Patrick. As you know, Vicki Allendorf had planned to speak this evening. We honor her tireless efforts to call attention to this epidemic. Since Vicki cannot be with us tonight, Lori Peters has graciously offered to share her experiences.
Thank you for coming out. I can't believe there's this many people here, especially about a subject that's so close to my heart. Vicki, she should be the one standing here telling her story, but her story has changed. Her life will forever be changed. And it sickens me that we now share the bond of having lost a child. When she asked me to speak tonight, it really scared the pants off me. I'm not a very good public speaker. But then I started remembering Kelly, John, Jeremy, Patrick, Hunter, Zach, Terry, David, Abby. They can't speak anymore, so I had to. I had to speak for all the people that are suffering and plagued with this addiction. I want to tell you a little story. It's a true story. It's my son Kelly's story. It's our story. This is my son, Kelly, in this little black box. Never in a million years did I dream I'd be standing here talking to you, holding my 24-year-old son in a box. This is where heroin addiction will lead. This is the reality, and this is my reality. Kelly was a very, very happy kid. He had a wonderful childhood. He was always laughing, playing practical jokes. He was a clown. He was a joy to be around. Everybody loved him. That carried over into his adulthood. He was a self-taught musician, able to play multiple instruments. Music was his absolute passion. He was constantly playing music for people, playing his guitar. He could impromptu make up songs for the situation. He was just a clown. He was extremely loving and passionate. I think I actually probably received more hugs, kisses, and I love yous from him than anyone on the earth. If you knew Kelly very well and had never received a kiss or a hug from him, he probably didn't like you. One time while I was riding with my mother, they passed a homeless man. Kelly made my mom turn around, go back. He got out of the car, gave him his lunch and the last 20 bucks he had in his pocket. He said he did that because he got it. He knew what it was like to be down and out and shunned by society and sometimes by people he loved. At 18, Kelly was hospitalized with pancreatitis. And because of his age, the doctors weren't allowed to tell me what had caused it. After a little bit of talking with Kelly, he finally told me. He said he'd been smoking crack cocaine. He said it scared him and he'd never do it again. The opioids in his system were never given a second thought because they were giving him pain medication in the hospital. We were approached about treatment by the hospital staff. I believe it was Turning Point. My son didn't need treatment. What do you mean? He didn't need it. He promised he'd never do it again. So, no treatment. Little did I know his addiction was already in full swing. His addiction progressed, and so did mine. My addiction to saving my son. Kelly's opiate abuse started with prescription meds, just like they're talking about. He and his friends would take them from medicine cabinets, probably from mine. My spoon started disappearing. There were Q-tips all over his room. He was losing weight. His eyes were sunken in. His voice had this raspiness to it. He would nod off in the middle of a conversation and then just say, I'm just real tired, Mom. I'm just real tired. He was always sick, laying around in bed for days, sweating profusely, moaning, and begging for the pain to stop. We rode that roller coaster for a couple of years. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn. So I went on the internet, Googled it, and I found Mecca in Iowa City. He agreed to go to Mecca, which was unbelievable. He went. During the intake, when we got there, my mom and I sat there with him. He allowed us to, and listened to everything that was said. That's when I really realized how severe this was. I heard horror stories of him overdosing and his friends doing CPR on him and putting him in a tub of ice. Nobody called 911. They were afraid to. I visited him every week, and my funny Kelly had returned. We would play games, we would laugh, we would tell jokes, and he'd become kind of a star at Mecca because he'd play guitar and it was never-ending comedy with him. When he had graduated from there, several people approached me and told me how they actually would seek Kelly out for support when they were there. I thought this was a miracle. This was a miracle we'd been praying for. I was just absolutely so proud of him. He did great for a time until the dealers and other users started calling and texting. Too many triggers, and he wanted to use so bad. So he decided to turn to alcohol and benzodiazepines. He had those prescribed from a psychiatrist. But that was okay, because now he had a legal addiction. With this combination, he rolled a car, got an OWI, amongst other criminal charges. This led to more depression, more alcohol, and whatever he could get his hands on. I couldn't even keep bottles of cough syrup in my house. I received a call at work informing me that my son was being taken to the hospital by ambulance. While he was watching his little sister, he popped some extra benzos and drove his bicycle down to my neighbor's farm. He went into his shed, stole and drank an entire bottle of whiskey and multiple beers. The neighbor found him bloody, trying to drive his bike, incoherent. He did not even know his own name. He told them his name was Gary Owen from Omaha. No idea where that came from. Great, now my son's a thief, and his addiction has progressed so much that it means more than his little sister, who he loved more than anything on the earth. I went to the ER to find him strapped to the gurney. He couldn't even say, "Hi, Mom." He just gurgled. That's when I knew he had to be committed, so my mom and I went straight to the courthouse, and we signed the papers. He was court-ordered to a facility in Waterloo, and they thought he was doing so well, they discharged him after 21 days. 21 days. He didn't even make the 28. So they ordered him to Turning Point, which he went to, and the first night, he showed up drunk. Of course, they gave him a second chance because that's the business they're in, and he actually did complete their program with flying colors. At this point, he had moved in with his girlfriend to a cute little apartment in Monticello, out of my house, and he started working here and there, and I thought maybe things would ease up a little bit for me. But when the urge or trigger came, he was right back to using. It was ridiculous. He had legal troubles stacking up against him. It was just not ending. So even though he was out of the house on his own, my addiction to saving him continued. It was maybe even harder now because I was always wondering, and I didn't know whether to answer the phone. Of course I did, but I was afraid to. We encouraged him to try one more treatment facility. It was supposed to be a really good treatment facility. It was in Bettendorf. We had to pay thousands of dollars out of our pocket above what insurance would pay, so of course it's going to be the best, right? Well, what I found out is they mainly treat wealthy alcoholics. Even though they advertise themselves as a multifaceted treatment facility. And soon, after about 21 days, they called and said they could no longer help him. They said the other patients were scared of his stories and his drawings. Yeah, 21 days again and he's out, some multifaceted facility. Kelly was really hurt and confused by this. He was hurt by the rejection. He was confused that he was supposed to be at a place that was supposed to accept him and love him and help him, and they kicked him out. I thought for sure he was going to relapse this time again, but he didn't. It drove him. It drove him and his girlfriend to stay sober. They got full-time jobs. He landed a wonderful job at JP Cycle that he loved. They were both working full-time, going to NA meetings, AA meetings. Things were just awesome. They were going great. Until last spring, I received a call from Lisa crying. Kelly overdosed. But she called 911 right away and started rescue breathing. When the EMTs arrived, they gave him Narcan, and he made it. She had went to bed that night and woke up with an uneasy feeling. So she went out and checked, and there she found him blue and unresponsive in the living room. He'd gotten the heroin earlier in the day when he went to Dubuque because he had court-ordered classes that he had to attend in Dubuque. He waited to use it until she went to bed. Having just died and been brought back and given another chance, he was determined this time to beat it. The next few months, this is when he actually got the job at JP Cycle. He rode his bike daily. He stayed really busy. He was really happy. He was gaining confidence every day. I thought we were completely out of the woods, and we let our guard down. It was a Friday, August 28th, and he rode with me in to Dubuque for his last court-ordered class. Thank God there were no more reasons for him to come to Dubuque. We talked so much that morning, a lot more than usual, and it was really nice. When I dropped him off, he kissed me. He said, "Thank you, Mom, I love you." And that was the last time I saw him. After class, he spent the rest of the afternoon downtown playing guitars at different pawn shops. I'm not sure if he sought it out or if they came to him, but Kelly got heroin again. He hung out with an old friend for a while, and then he went to spend the night at his dad's house. They had a wonderful night. They ate and they ate and they talked about their plans for the weekend because the next day they were going to see several bands to celebrate his dad's birthday. I had no fear of him being with his dad. I was actually quite relieved. But I woke up to a phone call, August 29th at 5 in the morning. Kelly was purple and cold, and he thought he was dead. I said, no, that's impossible. He's not dead. You need to do CPR. Give him Narcan. He's not dead. He'll come back. No, it was too late. I waited and waited for them to call me back and tell me that they gave him the Narcan and he was going to be okay. I never got that call. I was just numb. I got to the ER. I was greeted by hospital staff, the drug task force, and the question came, what funeral home do you want? What funeral home? It was real. My baby was dead. The next few days, I just shut down. His 16-year-old brother shut down. I think he stayed in bed for 48 hours. I had to plan my baby's funeral. There was an outpouring of love and support from so many people. Suddenly, everybody wanted to know about addiction. They felt so bad that they didn't know Kelly better and that they hadn't done more for him. Gradually, this wore off for some people, and the comments about the losers and the junkies returned. I withdrew from those people. I keep hearing, why did he even start? Why didn't he stop? Well, I don't know. Why did you pick up your first cigarette? Why did you pick up your first drink? Why do you drive your car too fast? Why do you have unprotected sex? No, I don't know. There were times that Kelly would cry and cry. He was so depressed because his life had come to this. He didn't want to be like this. He didn't wake up and say, I'm going to be a drug addict. I'm going to be a heroin addict. He hated what he had become. He hated his own skin. That's part of the reason why he used, was so he could feel numb and not feel who he was. Then you wonder, did I fail as a mother? What happened? I don't know. You can speculate. Some situations are kind of obvious, but nobody really knows. We're not immune to this. Nobody's immune. It happens to everyone. It's the rich people, the poor people, the jocks, the honor students, the nerds, the dropouts. It happens to everybody, and it happened to my boy. Look at Vicky, the biggest recovery advocate I know, and she lost 2 boys in one night. Are you going to tell her she did something wrong? In Vicky's words, all I can say is recently the system completely and epically failed despite my begging and pleading for help and mercy. Our kids have been robbed of their future because this system failed.
Thank you, Lori. And finally, discussing community solutions is Melissa Springer, Director of Mercy's Turning Point Treatment Center.
I just want to thank Lori for coming last minute, sharing. That's very courageous. I have my water with me. I'm starting to lose my voice. Today at Turning Point, we fielded 30 phone calls from members of the community wanting very quick access to care for their opioid use disorder. We double booked our clinicians. You know, when I look at the last 5 years at Turning Point, we treated 0 people for heroin, 0 people for heroin, 0 people for heroin, 8 people for heroin, 55 people for heroin last fiscal year. Our colleagues at Substance Abuse Services Center treated 88 in that same time. You know, we treated 250 people for alcohol use disorder and 200 people for cannabis use disorder. So 55 patients, a number that paled in comparison to those other figures, but a spike no less. And what really caught our attention was that of those 55 patients that we treated, they almost all had hepatitis or tuberculosis or HIV/AIDS or infected injection sites or infected veins requiring surgical removal. So it was becoming a public health epidemic. In May, I was in Des Moines at a business meeting, and a gal who worked with the Iowa Department of Public Health approached me and said, "Hey, Melissa, are you going to be applying for those federal dollars to help the epidemic in Dubuque?" She went on to tell me that the money was to be used for medication-assisted treatment, the new standard of care, the new best practice for treating opioid use disorder. She said it would probably be to the tune of about $500,000. And I have to be honest, you know, I've worked in mental health and substance abuse, and I got a little bit excited about $500,000. I thought, wow, what we can do with $500,000. But then she went on to tell me why we were eligible for that money. That our county, Dubuque County, was named a county in need of assistance, that we had been named a high intensity drug trafficking area. And because of the overdoses from opioids and the resulting deaths, the preventable deaths, the Kellys, we were eligible for this money. They had earned this money for our community so that other families didn't have to go through this unimaginable loss, this very preventable loss. So my heart just sunk into my stomach. I came home the next day. I talked with our treatment team. I talked with our medical director, talked with our colleagues at SASE. We needed their help. We needed them on board for the capacity issue. Talked with our now president of our hospital and her executive team, who gave me the go-ahead to proceed with the federal grant. The United States Department of Health and Human Services put up $3 million, and they said, what state wants it for your heroin epidemic? And 18 states wanted the money, and all of it was given to Iowa, all of it. We proceeded with writing the grant, and I do have to say, I want Lori to know this, that I spent about a month writing that federal grant. It was over 100 pages, and sometimes my fingers were just typing at my keyboard, and I didn't even know what to put. They were just going. In October 29th, to be exact, we were awarded the almost $500,000 for our community to provide medication-assisted treatment, to use FDA-approved medications to treat opioid use disorder and alcohol use disorder. But it was going to take specially trained physicians to have a special waiver to be able to prescribe one of the medications, buprenorphine. Currently, in the state of Iowa, there are 9 physicians prescribing buprenorphine, Suboxone. We now have 3 of them here, Dr. Boxleiter, Dr. Chakunta, and Dr. Casas. I would be remiss not to mention medical associates because, you know, here we are pulling, you know, 3 physicians out of their office productivity at their clinics. They're already overbooked and understaffed, and we're pulling them out of there to say, hey, can you come to Turning Point so you can provide medical evaluations and history and physicals and do lab works and prescribe medication and see SASE's patients and Turning Point's patients and take all that on. I mean, this has really put the medical community, the clinicians, the hospital, the emergency departments, in a real situation. Because historically, which many of you have experienced, opioid use disorder, acute opioid withdrawal, did not equate to being admitted to a hospital. People had flu-like symptoms. So people would be turned away. You know, you don't meet criteria. Good luck. Call SASE, here's a brochure. Call Turning Point, here's a brochure. You know, we don't tell people when they're having heart attacks, you know, geez, come back in 3 weeks when we have a bed available. So we are very grateful now to have developed an outpatient Suboxone induction pathway. We wanted to find a way to manage the need in our community so we didn't need the ER. We didn't need the inpatient psychiatric unit. We didn't need the ICU. We didn't need residential treatment. You know, there's a lot of gaps in Dubuque. In talking with our honored speakers tonight, we're very glad that you came to Dubuque to help us. You know, they've done these town hall meetings in other communities, and people haven't been quite as upset. But those communities have a few more levels of care. They have a few more resources. As Officer Fear said, we're now having those conversations very urgently about the service gaps and what we need to do differently so that people have very timely access to care when they need it. You know, at Mercy, we just got a helicopter, and that Air Care 3 is saying we realize and we recognize that getting a patient to the appropriate level of care in a timely fashion will save their life. So we need that same standard of care for substance use disorders. I know there are many people in this room who are in the thralls of addiction or who are in early recovery. It's been really tough. It's been tough to hear their stories and their struggles and see their tears and see their mother's anguish. You know, I've worked in state policy and federal policy, and I've collected data and numbers, and we're looking at trends and spikes and peaks. But when I'm sitting in a room with a mother who's just lost her only child to this disease, it does put it into a different perspective. And I have worked in this area for 21 years, and I've seen a lot of spikes in drug use over the years: methamphetamine spike, synthetic cannabinoid spike, ecstasy spike, bath salts. But never has a situation been more severe or urgent than our current opioid epidemic. You know, when I talk to Officer Fear, who has an unwavering dedication to eradicating this off of our streets and finding community solutions, he says, "Melissa, it hasn't even hit here yet. You know, this is just the fringe." Well, we are inundated. I want to talk a little bit about accessing care. And this is very important. You can present to Mercy Turning Point, you can present to Substance Abuse Services Center, have an evaluation. At either location, you can then be eligible to meet with our waivered physicians to see if a medication might be right for you. Again, it's the new best practice, it's the new standard of care. Turning Point will celebrate 30 years this year, but we've always done talk therapy and 12-step work, which are very, very good and solid and needed. But we have been missing the boat by not having medications readily available in our community to treat the brain disease. Do not delay. If you are struggling, you need to seek care immediately. Do not delay. And I vow my continued advocacy. I will work with our panel members, with families that have lost children, with our colleagues at Substance Abuse Services Center, our partner at Helping Services for Northeast Iowa. You know, I'd much rather be on the prevention side of this. You know, this week we were working with our pastoral care department at Mercy to create a grief group to meet because there's such a need now. Everybody that comes through our door is in acute grief because they've known somebody that's died. You know, I'd much rather be on the prevention side of things than trying to pick up the pieces later and create a grief group. I am cautiously optimistic. We were awarded that money October 29th, and 30 days later, on December 1st, we started treating our first patients, which again is no small miracle. How in 30 days, a medical center involving 10 departments, a medical associate clinic, substance abuse services center, Turning Point, somehow it all worked that we were able to start treating those first patients in December, who are now realizing 3 and 4 months sobriety. It is my hope that all the grief in this room, all the sorrow, the anger, the fear, the ideas, the resources, that somehow we can channel that and use that to get us to where we need to be in this community. Because no community, no all-American city, as hardworking and as resourceful as this one, can sit back and allow this to continue to devastate our families. This has been really tough. I spent the earlier part of our week talking to our care team about self-care. Our hearts have been heavy this week. And I guess it's my hope that, again, that terrible suffering that we're experiencing, that we can use that. That we can use that to make positive changes. You know, today the Iowa Department of Public Health contacted me and said, Melissa, you got that $500,000, yet now we're seeing 5 overdose deaths since March 1st. What's going on? What do you need? I said, well, we don't have opioid-specific detox, and we don't have residential level of care. We don't have crisis teams for our emergency department. They said, we'll send more money. They have more funding for us. I cannot stand up here and overpromise something that Mercy, our colleagues, we can't deliver on, but I can tell you there's very urgent conversations being held about the service gaps and the need to be able to connect people to help timely so that it saves their life. If you are currently somebody who is in the thralls of addictive disease, or you are in early recovery, you know, tonight there's been a lot of imaging, a lot of paraphernalia. The counselor in me doesn't want anybody to leave here in a state of craving. So we have Substance Abuse Services Center, Turning Point, Helping Services, our good friends with NA, AA, Al-Anon, Nar-Anon. Hillcrest. Please stop by those tables. Please take resources. Please talk to the counselors. Take the resources to your churches, your schools, your workplaces. Give them to your family members. Have the conversations with your children. This is the call to action. Everybody in this room tonight is part of the solution. We are going to move into now a time-limited question and answer session with our panel members. And we will not get to all the questions or all the concerns, but we will continue to have this dialogue. Please reach out. If you have an idea, a suggestion, you want to know more information, please reach out. All contact information is available on those resource tables. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. The folks that have spoken for us tonight have agreed to sit on the panel, and in addition to the far right, my far right is Dr. Boxleiter, one of the, what's the term, physicians that are waivered physicians, thank you. So what we're going to do, if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. We're going to have two folks out in the audience, Michelle here and the gal back in the brown, Sherry, who have microphones so that everybody can hear your concern. They will get to you, ask your question, address it to whoever you need. We also have other folks here that will be able to address some questions that maybe these folks at the front won't be able to answer. So, okay, we're ready to take our first question.
Hi, I'm Gail Gabbard. I'm with the Galena Clinic, and I have two other counselors with me as well. We've been doing opiate addiction treatment for 5 years in Galena. We have been treating your Dubuque residents, your Eastern Iowa residents. Just wanted to let you know that we're here. We provide methadone as well as buprenorphine, Suboxone, and I'm not sure why we were not included in the resources here, but just want to let you know that we're here and we've got your back as well. Thank you.
I have a question. It's two parts. With the FDA changes on the Schedule II opioids, do you foresee an increase in heroin problems since the availability of the hydrocodones, oxycodones will be cut? And then the second question is, what is the likelihood of Dubuque having a methadone clinic, and is it effective?
Well, on the first part of opioids being limited, there may be some limitation on opioids, but I think we're still in for a long haul on opioids, because even if a prescription is for a limited duration, you'll still be able to go back and get that prescription refilled. You'll still have to go back and see the doctor. It will require more doctor's visits, but if the addiction is taken hold, I anticipate you're still going to have the same type of opioid problems we have now, which is the conversion, the pill to heroin pipeline. As for methadone clinics, I'll defer to someone else.
Within Turning Point Medical Associates, we weren't planning at this point to go the methadone route. We were hoping to use the Suboxone route instead, because it is significantly less expensive for the patients, significantly less intrusive for their lifestyles. With methadone, you need to go in daily to pick up your medication. With Suboxone, we can provide after induction up to a month's supply of it. Fortunately, Suboxone in its form that we're prescribing cannot be abused through the IV route, so it is ultimately safer, and we're more comfortable with using it.
I've got a question back here.
Yeah, Friday night I had to call in an ambulance to take my friend that overdosed on heroin, and me and my other friend went and got him committed the next morning, and we have a hearing on Friday. However, they're saying that they might not be able to place him anywhere because he has been in treatment. He got out of treatment in December, and they're saying there's a 6-month gap that he has to take before he gets in there. But I want to know, he told me that he did it to make a point that he needs help. And I guess I just want to know if you guys can give me any direction with this.
Your concern is a very real one. You know, we do not have level 3.5 residential care in Dubuque. About an hour and a half in any direction, you can reach that level of care. Unfortunately, you know, like I said earlier, there's a wait list. You know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. That's just unacceptable. We need to create more beds in our state so that people have timely access.
Hi.
Can I add one thing to that, and that is that one of the biggest things that stands in the way is that funding for providing this kind of care has been whittled repeatedly over the last 10 years or so by our state government and by other agencies. So beds are being lost, and with every bed lost, the demand for the remaining beds goes up. We've had patients on our psychiatric unit that we have felt very uncomfortable discharging from the hospital, but beds are not available, especially if that person does not have funding resource of their own. So unfortunately, as it often does, it comes down to the dollar. What I'd encourage anybody involved in this issue to do is talk with their representatives in the government and ask for more assistance. Ask them to stop being so concerned about the tax issue and more concerned about the lives of all of our citizens.
Hi. Got one over here.
Am I over here? Okay. So when Pat was doing introductions, he listed off a number of different groups of people that were in the room, but he forgot to mention that there's a lot of people in this room that are in long-term recovery. And my name is Carolyn Scherf, and I have a thing to say and a question also. I want to thank everyone that put this together, and especially Lori for sharing her story. I lost my friend on Thursday to this disease, and the week before he died, he sent me, we had a conversation on Facebook, and he was recovering from this disease using the Suboxone program, and he was in year 2 of being on Suboxone. And what he said was they shouldn't put people on Suboxone. Getting off heroin is easy compared to Suboxone. What they need to do is not give Suboxone for withdrawal and make in-treatment rehab at least 3 months mandatory. 30-day rehab is a joke, and it gets people killed. The only rehabs that have significant success rates are 6 months to a year. And I'm not saying one way or the other what should be done. I'm just saying that my dead friend said that. I also want to say that if there's resources available, we need a lot more than Suboxone. There's no recovery housing in this town, and there are people that are interested in making that happen. And if you want to learn more about that, you can stop by the NA table after this.
Thank you.
I would also like to ask a question. I'm very grateful for the work that Vicki and others have done to get this bill signed last week to make Narcan and naloxone more available to our community. And I'm wondering what the plan is to get not just police officers and EMTs trained in this, but also the people that are with addicts when they're overdosing. Lori shared that the people that were with her son didn't call 911, and I expect that a lot of other people won't call 911. So I want to know what the plan is to get community members trained in administering this life-saving drug.
We're going to defer this question to a pharmacist from the Mercy Family Pharmacy.
Hi, I'm with Mercy Family Pharmacy, and a bill was passed, like they talked about, on April 6th by the governor. It was signed, but a bill does not necessarily make a law. So now it has to go to the Rules Committee, who will write up rules for this, and that we're hoping for July 1st, that rules will be written. At that time, you can go to a website, and you can submit your public comment. There will be a time for public comment on it as to how it will be available. That will determine how we can make it available to caregivers, family, emergency personnel. So right now, we don't have any. You can't just call your pharmacy or go to your doctor, ask for a prescription for Narcan. There's no rules as to how that can be done. So that's would be your next step if you want to be have part of saying how that rule or how that bill becomes a law.
We've got a question over here.
One thing to keep in mind on Narcan, even if it's available to family members or EMTs, or once it's more available, you still have to call for emergency services. Still have to go to the hospital, because Narcan's half-life, the amount it lasts in your blood, is shorter than the opioids. So it's frequently required that multiple doses of Narcan will be needed over the course of time. So if you just do one shot of Narcan and never call 911, that person could overdose on that same opioid that's still coursing through their veins once the Narcan wears off and the mu receptors are available for the opioid. So training is going to be critical for not only EMTs and firefighters, but also for family members to know not only how to use it, but how to get the follow-up care.
I know Vicki Allendorf through I Hate Heroin is working on a grant to bring naloxone to our community to make sure it's readily available. I know Lori, with her training, might consider being a trainer for that. And again, it's putting that terrible loss and unimaginable grief into action to make sure other people don't suffer the same. And we are grateful for that.
Hi, my two nephews died Saturday, and my question is, why can't prescribers prescribe pain medication for the 3 or 4 days they need it instead of 30 and 40 at a time?
Unfortunately, that's a very good question. Practices over the last 10 to 15 years have been to be more generous than I ever felt comfortable with in prescribing narcotics, partly because of some of the things that were mentioned earlier, pain becoming the 5th vital sign, hospitals and providers being penalized for not adequately controlling pain, quote unquote. It has become a practice to overtreat pain basically to protect yourself. And that needs to change, and I think that's part of what's going on with some of the new rules and regulations. They're probably not strong enough, but it's heading in that direction. And my hope would be in the future, narcotics would be prescribed only when other mechanisms as an outpatient have failed, and then regulated much more closely.
So then that would be an issue for you providers. I mean, dollars is dollars, but lives are so much more important than your clinic making money.
Well, it's not the clinic making money, it's whether or not we have license or whether or not we can keep the doors open. It's a bigger issue.
Okay, and I understand all that, but there's so many people here that have lost. It all starts with pain medication. So obviously that's an issue that really needs to be addressed by providers.
And that is definitely something that's in the process of being addressed. Unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of time to re-educate people, and it will take a long time to re-educate the patients as well in their expectations.
And we had a comment, too, from someone saying, can we as patients ask our family doctor if they are currently using the PMP system? So I think maybe pressure from you when you do see your doctor would help, get physicians in that system, too, so people couldn't doctor shop.
Hi, I'm Kim. I'd like to give you some good news. I am honored to be a mother and have been on the journey with my son, addict. And I have a success story. He's been going to the Galena Methadone Clinic for 4 years. Dr. Davis was the physician, Gail Gabbert, the psychologist, Pam the nurse, and Judy have walked not just him but me through this. We've got all information we could ever have used. It's a miracle he's alive. I have a child who's alive who has gotten so much out of that program, and he was in 2 treatment programs, trying to get information on the methadone clinic. You couldn't, nobody knew about it. I can't believe half hour from here, people are there saving lives there and have never gotten recognized from the Telegraph Herald. It's very upsetting to me that we have had something for 5 years and it has not been pushed, and it should have been. There'd be more people alive. And I have a living son, and I thank God every day, and so by the grace of God go I, we could all be in the same predicament.
We have a question over here.
Hi, yeah, I'm really glad you guys are doing this. This problem is becoming so severe. I just wanted to follow up on what a young lady said over here about length of treatment time. About 10 years ago, I found myself in the middle of a severe oxycodone-oxycontin addiction. After being treated for kidney stones, they gave me a large number of pills, and I went home and felt that they killed the pain and they made me feel better and just kept taking them. I work in healthcare. I'm a physical therapist. This can happen to anybody. I knew what this stuff did, but I still kept taking them because the addiction grew and grew. Over the course of about a little bit less than a year and a half, almost 2 years, I had lost my business, I had lost my fiance, I had lost my house, I lost my car, I had a few friends and family members that supported me, but otherwise I had lost just about everything. The legal problems mounted. I had committed crimes. I was in jail, Officer Fear. I was in jail. I was out of jail. Didn't help. As soon as I got back out, I ran right back out and got some more pills because the addiction was that strong. The addiction itself is horrendous. For those of you who haven't been through it, you can't even imagine it. The feeling of helplessness, thinking that you can solve the problem yourself, and if you try to get help, it's not going to work anyway. That's the illusion of it all. So you end up locking yourself in your house for a week, trying to recover. At the end of the week, you're so sick you have to call and get more pills. The legal problems stacked up so much, the courts had put me in drug court. I was on probation. We had tried counseling. We had tried treatment. I failed at that because I don't think I gave it enough of a try. The only thing that worked in the end and probably saved my life was the state of Wisconsin, where all this occurred, had put me into a drug abuse correctional center through the Department of Corrections, I'm sorry to say, but that's through the prison system. Yeah, I'm not proud of that. It doesn't look good on a resume. But that probably saved me, and I'm almost ashamed to admit that's the only thing that probably saved me was confinement. So my question is it possible to establish a level of confinement within the legal system that would be just a level of confinement, not within the Department of Corrections? Is that something that's even viable? That would last something like 6 or 8 months, which is how long I was in this program, which to me finally did the trick because nothing else came close.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about a trip that we took up to Madison, Wisconsin, and Prairie to Sac County. They have a program in their jail system called the CARE program. I wish I could remember what it stands for, but I don't. I'm sorry. It's a CARE program. Google it. Joan Mack is in charge of the program, okay, and she's amazing. It involves a program in the jail system, so when somebody comes in, the intake, and they've been charged with opioids or heroin, they get the chance to say if they're ready for recovery, okay? From that point, then they get hooked up with counseling services before they leave the jail. They detox in the jail system. When they come out of the jail, they get a Vivitrol shot. The Vivitrol rep works with this program and gives the first month for free. Okay, and that's huge because Vivitrol, as if you guys don't know, is about $1,200 $1,300 a shot. So it's very expensive, $1,200. So giving that first month for free is a big deal, along with counseling services. Intensive outpatient therapy is huge. So to answer your question, we need to work with the county jail systems here in Dubuque. I'm doing the same thing in Lynn County right now, as a matter of fact. And I've had a meeting with the Vivitrol rep. She lives in Illinois, but she came to Iowa. I'm sorry? What is Vivitrol? Okay, I'm sorry. Let me back up. Vivitrol is an extended release medication that helps subside the addiction cravings, and also there's no withdrawal symptoms, okay? So it'll last a month. So it's one shot a month, and then you don't have to do a daily thing. You don't have to go anywhere every day. You don't have to take a pill every day. It's a month, which is outstanding, especially for someone who's suffering from addiction. The doctor could say more about Vivitrol than, I'm not a doctor, I'm a dumb cop, so. But anyway.
Are these new programs? Because this
Yes.
occurred in my life 10 years ago. It was
Yes,
a
it is,
2-year
yes.
period of time that was horrible, and I've been fine since
Yes.
that time. But
Yep.
it took that
Yep.
to finally.
It's a great question, and I think that, unfortunately, if you're stuck in the jail system, that is, for detoxification, it's great, a place to be, because you're very regimented, you're in there alone, you're away from all society's issues, and you're away from the drug, and it's great. On that side of the coin, I mean, jail sucks, don't get me wrong, but from a treatment standpoint, I think it's a good idea. And that program is also expanding throughout Illinois and Wisconsin, and we're going to be the first ones that have it here in Iowa.
I just wanted to say that I have two sons that were addicts. One has passed away at the age of 24, and my second son is, his life has been saved by the methadone clinic in Galena. He's been there for a year successfully, and I'd like to thank you, Gail, for your service.
Hi, thank you for your time, and I'm so overwhelmed by seeing everyone here sharing the pain and the anger. My name is Lori Swift, and I have committed a large number of people, as Melissa is nodding her head, and I have a couple of questions. First of all, I'm hearing that the treatment for this is expensive, and now I understand that in comparison to the drug use, it's not expensive. But when we look at the individuals who are using either drugs or alcohol are oftentimes committing crimes or getting the money in ways that are not socially acceptable. And so my question is, here in Dubuque, with this wonderful amount of money coming in here and the huge, vast need that we have here, how are we going to bridge the gap between people whose lives have been cremated and have nothing, and their families have nothing from the years of addiction and the toll it's taken, to the answers which are sitting in the hands of doctors and clinics that cost $300 to walk into, that cost $1,000, it appears, for the shots, and even the community clinics cost money to get into, and people are fried. They're cremated. They're financially not even capable of putting food on the table, oftentimes at the point where these individuals are reaching out for help. So my question is, how is it going to happen? Give me the exact, you know me, Melissa, give me the exact step-by-step process. That's what I want. Number two, I want to know everybody's feedback on the book, the New York Times best-selling book, called Chasing the Scream. I'd recommend everybody write that down. And there's a YouTube video called Why Everything We Know About Addiction is Wrong. It has 5 million views. I'd also recommend individuals watch that, because Portugal is a country that took a radical approach to an epidemic far
greater than ours right now, and they've been able to reduce their addiction rates by over 50%. And the answers to that are in the video. I just want to let you know that. So number one, exactly how are we going to get access, especially those who are at the bottom of the society? And number two, what's your thoughts on everything we know about addiction is wrong?
Lori's been a real champion for 12-step work in our community. You know, buprenorphine runs about $28 a day, and thankfully, right now, we do have the medication-assisted treatment grant that can cover these costs for a 3-year period. But then we want to look at how we are going to sustain that long-term. And there's many efforts in place regarding advocacy with insurance companies, Blue Cross and Blue Shield, to name, I believe of Illinois, that's now beginning to cover Vivitrol shots and Suboxone. Our Medicaid privatization, looking at that there's a cost-added value to managing patients using medication because it keeps them out of higher levels of care and it saves their lives. So process is simple for Dubuque. And maybe Gail could speak about process for the methadone clinic in Galena. But in Dubuque, to access care for opioid use disorder, you present a Mercy Turning Point or Substance Abuse Services Center for an evaluation. You have to meet DSM-5 criteria for opioid use disorder. You're then eligible to meet with one of the waivered physicians who do about $3,000 worth of lab work at no cost to you, and continue to prescribe maintenance dosing if a medication is appropriate. And we're not being very rigid about who we're allowing to do that with. If people have resources, but they have very high deductibles, or they're in financial burden because of their addictive disease, then they are eligible. We need to have timely access to the medication. Gail, did you want to mention about access to your clinic?
I think she's gone.
Oh, she's gone. Anybody else?
I think up
No?
there.
Okay.
My question goes back to the Suboxone, which I think is a wonderful drug, but I think anybody that knows somebody in the throes of addiction knows that the addicts know how to use this drug. And I think we have a real need for a medical detox center around here. When people go to the emergency room now, you talk about outpatient. That just means they're given this Suboxone. They're not admitted to be medically detoxed, right?
I think you need to understand that medical detox and the Suboxone program are two totally separate tracks, because in order to be started on Suboxone, and these are regulations through the government, that a patient has to be in a certain degree of withdrawal. The reason for that is that if they are not in withdrawal or not in severe enough withdrawal, the Suboxone could put them in severe withdrawal. So that's what we're doing with the Suboxone program. We tell a patient they have to be clean for 24 hours before they come in. We check their degree of withdrawal. If it is severe enough, we can start the Suboxone. If it's not, we can wait a while and try it again later on in the day or something to that effect. Now, when you're talking about detox, detox is expressly with the goal to get the patient off of a narcotic completely. And in all honesty, it's not very effective to detox, because you take a patient off a medication over a relatively short period of time. In a hospital, it's a matter of days. You may have gotten them past the physiological symptoms, but you've gotten nowhere near touching the psychological issues, and that's where a long-term outpatient program like ours would be functional. an important thing to know is that when we have patients on Suboxone, we don't just give them the drug and say, come back next week and let us know how it's going. What we say is, all right, these are the requirements to continue getting Suboxone. We have a contract with them about distribution, about keeping their drugs safe and so forth and so on. We require them to become involved in an intensive outpatient program, and for us it's either through Turning Point or through SASE. Even after the completion of that program, which usually runs upwards of 6 weeks, maybe to 8 weeks, patients are required to continue with some outpatient follow-up for extended period of time. Our goal when we're using Suboxone is to control the withdrawal, control the craving, stabilize a patient over a matter of usually months on Suboxone at a set dose, and then begin a gradual, and I mean exceedingly gradual, process of backing them off by tiny increments. And strictly speaking, that is the only thing that's been shown to be truly effective. Inpatient detox, unless you're 1 in a million, is not a very effective procedure.
I guess my thought was just more of buying some of these people some time to get themselves established in a treatment program. Right now, we don't have that. And I know myself, I was one that went with my son to the hospital to be turned away. He even told him he was suicidal. They turned him away. He went back and used that night. Thank God he's clean today, but how many more did that happen to? These people need time to buy some time to find a place to get their people in treatment. It just doesn't work this way. We need some place for them to go. We were lucky. We had insurance. There's people out there that have no means of finding a treatment center somewhere who they're just turning them back on the streets. They need to medically detox, be weaned off this stuff, and find a treatment program for them. It's the only way it's going to work for them.
Statistically, though, detoxing in a treatment program presents an extremely high risk of relapse. A maintenance program such as the Suboxone doesn't eliminate that, but it dramatically decreases that risk. And in my perspective, at least, the goal is still to get patients off of the narcotics. But narcotic addiction is something that you can't possibly fully understand unless you've experienced it. The narcotics become second only to oxygen to the patients who are addicted. And so if you're going to work to get the patients off of that, you've got to plan a very gradual, very long-term process. And it may take, the patients that I'm dealing with right now in the Turning Point medication-assisted treatment program, I anticipate that they might start the gradual tapering after 3 or 4 months. It may take, depending on how much medication they're taking and how they do, it may take a year or two to completely get off of the narcotics. But that's what time it's just going to have to take, because the brain has become so modified by that drug. You've got to give your brain that physiological time to change. The thing that happens with a narcotic is you start taking them, and the receptors in your brain that pick up that narcotic get blocked, which is great. That produces the response you're looking for. But your brain doesn't like that. So your brain makes some more receptors. So you need a little more drug to block those receptors. And that cycle keeps going and going and going. And so when you are taking the patient off of these drugs, you've got to give their brain time to dump all those billions of new receptors that have been created. Because if they aren't, and you take the drug away, those receptors start screaming to be satisfied. And that's what addiction, and that's what withdrawal is. So it's got to be a slow process. Unfortunately, it's a much quicker process to get addicted than to get unaddicted.
Okay, we've got one more question. This will be it for this period.
Is it weird if I ask a question? So to Doctor, I don't mean to call you out, but this whole detoxification thing is something that I'm battling right now, and everywhere I go. So I understand what you're saying, okay? And my question to you is, what is your opinion on when a parent, a mother, a father brings their child into the ER, and they say, okay, I'm bringing my child here to get some help. And then the ER says, well, sorry, we don't admit. You need to go back home and detox. So then we're putting them back in the same situation that they just came from that caused the problem in the first place. And that's my issue with this, is that we need detoxification to get them out of that environment, in my opinion. And I know that Waterloo Covenant Hospital has a detoxification, and they get inpatient and all that stuff, and they've been great to work with. We need that here, in my opinion, for the detoxification as well, just because understanding how addiction works and the problems that they have at home or wherever they're coming from, when we refuse them at the hospital, they're just going to go right back into that element. So that's I don't know what you say.
It's been a statewide issue. It's a national issue. In the last year, Turning Point provided 555 consults throughout Mercy to patients on every floor in the hospital that were there because of substance use disorders and other biomedical complications. In the past 12 months, on our psychiatric unit, which is a 20-bed unit, we increased that by 4 beds not so long ago, and built a brand new unit when many places around the states were closing their mental health units. But half of the admissions to that floor, to that unit, have been patients with substance use disorders requiring detox, many of those for opioids, where the doctors have worked with methadone and straight buprenorphine, Subutex, and some different options. I see many psychiatric nurses in the crowd who've been real champions for working with many of these patients that are coming in. And, but we do need to do better, and there are service gaps.
Okay, we have one last question real quick back here in the back of the room. I also been told to say there's a lost cell phone or a found cell phone that's in a two-tone green cover back here.
My name is Dick Smith, and I work with the Drug Court Program, and I think that's a great program. The Drug Court Program works lots of times, but sometimes it doesn't. And one reason, people who are addicted sometimes commit crimes and they have to be accountable to the system, and therefore they get into the residential facility on Elm Street. I'm thinking that it doesn't work. Too often it doesn't work. Maybe, I'm suggesting that maybe the court system consider having a separate residential facility for people who have this problem.
Blow my anonymity here, guys. I'm Patty, and I am an addict. And my main drug of no choice was alcohol, but I got into some pills that were prescribed to me, and I lied through my teeth to get them. But addiction is a disease. It's a disease of the body. It's a disease of the mind. It's a disease of the emotions. And it's a disease of the spirit. And the 12-step program saved my life. I am so grateful for the doctors, the medical people in this community. Actually, our daughter is a doctor, and she works at Mercy. And her knowledge of addiction came from 1 little hour in her entire medical school time an AA person came in and informed the class about what addiction is. And we have a very strong recovering community in this town, but we stay under the radar. And there's lots of reasons for that. As that lady, I mean, I cried too. She lost her son to this horrible disease. And as she said, he just kept going back out. He just kept going back out. That's what we do. The therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel. My husband and children do not understand my disease. Back in 1995, my 18-year-old son was in the basement crying, and he said, "Mom, if you don't get help, I'm not going to college. Because Dad's at work all the time, and my little brother and my little sister, you're not capable of taking care of." That was my first hint that I had a problem. It's not denial, it's ignorance. I'm so grateful for Turning Point. I'm so grateful for people that work tirelessly. The law enforcement people. They work tirelessly to attend to this horrible disease that's been existing in this community for a very, very long time. I'm kind of glad that heroin's we got some attention now, I guess, huh? Then, my own little story here, I kept drinking. He went to college, I kept drinking. Then I got into some pills. It doesn't matter what the substance is. It's the disease that we need to deal with. And the physical detox, yes. You can die from withdrawal from alcohol. You can die, actually die from it. We need relief. We need our medical communities to work with our law enforcement people. I agree with Dick. I go to the drug court program on a regular basis. I'm retired. My children are all grown now, fully self-supporting through their own contributions. I'm really grateful for that. But they know what this disease is because they almost lost me. And my final 2x4 was when our oldest daughter said to me, "Go ahead and commit suicide and put us all out of our misery, Mom." She was crying at the time. And she didn't know exactly what it was either. We've talked every day since before then and right up to today. Because she can't fully relax. I'm an addict. I can get addicted to anything that makes me feel good. If it's on the table in the front of me, I want it. I've been sober for 12 straight years, clean and sober. And only for the program of NA and AA and being directed there by Turning Point and my family and lots of literature. That's how I'm standing here alive today, guys. And I feel so bad for those mothers because I'm a mom too. Education. We don't know what causes addiction completely. We don't know for sure. There is a genetic piece. There's an oversensitivity piece. There's so many pieces. But I'm about to ask a person who's a doctor. He was spiritual director at a very famous treatment center. And he's willing to come to this town and talk to our doctors and everybody that's affected by this disease. And I hope people come because I'll get the funding for it if I have to pay for it myself. And we're a big community in Dubuque, but we stay under the radar. Because the last thing an addict wants is a lot of attention. We help each other. And we know exactly how we think. And it's bizarre. My husband and children do not understand my thinking, but they are so happy that I go to meetings every day. I would like to suggest to the drug court people that they require daily meetings. Daily. Yeah, they have to get jobs, they have to go to all these things, but they need a meeting every day because they were using and drinking every day. And they still might be, because we're sneaky as hell. The getting and using and finding ways and means to get more became my entire life. And that was that drug, the legal one called alcohol. That's right. Thinking of alcohol and marijuana in Colorado, I just got back from there, as other drugs has caused a great many of us to relapse. But the thing is about alcohol, and maybe about marijuana too, not everybody gets addicted to it. And it's a thinking disease. The physical part, our medical people will help us with, thank God. And our cops will continue to arrest us and stick us somewhere, because that's what we need. We do need to get away from our drugs of no choice for a specific amount of time. But we also need more than that. We need understanding. We need that therapeutic value of one addict helping another. And it's here in Dubuque, strong. But we just don't say much. I'll probably get criticized for this from my community, but I don't care. Oh, thank you. And even if I do, I thought this was a wonderful forum, but you know, I could go on and on, guys, but now that, you know, I've gotten braver, because, you know, we talk about the Serenity Prayer. I don't know if you ever heard that. But anybody in recovery here, if you wouldn't mind reciting it with me? God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Okay, we'll wrap up here shortly. Al Fear will discuss a call to action and our next steps as a community.
Okay, the last part, call to action. I'll talk fast if we can get out of here, okay? I don't want to keep you guys much past our time here. Wait for it. Okay, how can you help? It's not about what I can do, it's not about what the U.S. Attorney can do, it's about what we can do together. That's the biggest thing. Everybody in here has a skill that you could help your community some way, somehow, and join together to make this thing slow down. I'm not going to say we're going to stop the problem, at least we can slow it down and save some lives. Counseling support, sponsor opportunities, family guidance, personal stories of survival that we've already heard tonight. Legislation and government, some of you like to lobby, like to talk to your congressman. I don't, but if you do, that's your thing. It's great. Fundraising, development. Somebody in here that's really good at planning things. Events, concerts, 5K races to raise money. That's what we need. We need money. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not here to go down here and take your wallets out of your pockets, but that's what the community needs. We need money to help these programs. Community action team. This is something that starts today. Crush of Eastern Iowa. Crush, Community Resources United to Stop Heroin. What is Crush? Crush of Eastern Iowa is a heroin prevention community action team established on today's date. The program will involve schools, law enforcement, treatment providers, community leaders, healthcare organizations to address the growing heroin epidemic in Dubuque. Get involved. Naloxone training for Dubuque community, support of families suffering from substance abuse, teen drug summits, working with healthcare providers to have healthcare standard for addiction. Continue to work on erasing the stigma associated with heroin addiction. To join Crush, I did not do this because I'm not near smart enough. Sue Green, please stand up, Sue. Sue Green with Helping Services for Northeast Iowa, correct, is a genius. If you text heroin to 51555, you will automatically be on an email distribution list and be part of the Crush team. You can then communicate with Sue or myself and tell me what you want to do. If you have your own personal story, we'll use it. We'll take you to our demonstrations, our presentations in the schools. If you have a teenager that's struggling with this, and they want to talk, we'll let them talk. We'll bring them to the schools with us. Text heroin to 51555. There's another way to do that. If you're not tech savvy, there's papers at your booth. At the front table, you can just write out your email address and your contact information for Sue and the Crush people of Eastern Iowa, and we will take care of it from there, okay? This is the next event that we have scheduled. Special event, April 28th at 7 p.m. at the Mind Frame Theaters on JFK Road is a showing of this 45-minute movie called Chasing the Dragon. It's about heroin addiction and following the life, and it's very, very moving. It's by the DEA and the FBI, and it's definitely worthwhile. That'll be the first official meeting for Crush at the movie theater. We'll have showing of the movie, then we'll sit down and talk about it, and we'll start developing plans of action to get this thing stopped here in Dubuque. Chasing the Dragon. And last but not least, I want to thank everybody who helped organize this event. When I call your name, if you'd stand up, please. Melissa Springer. Gwen Hall-Driscoll. Michelle Ahrensdorf. Kevin Tekow. Pat Reinert. Steve Young. Steve, wherever you're at. Back there. Sherry Konarski. Sue Green, and of course, Lori, Wellborn Peter, and Dr. Boxleiter. Thank you so much. I have one more comment. This is something that I learned from Vicki, and it's a statement she made on the news the other night, and it's going to forever stick with me. She said, it's not about bad people trying to be good. It's about sick people trying to be well. So, thank you very much. Kevin Tekow, closing statements.
Thank you so much for all that made this possible tonight. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your honesty, and I learned so much from your sincere comments and beliefs. The problems are large, but there are solutions, and so there are opportunities to make a difference. I hope you take this opportunity to move forward. The purpose of this meeting was to call attention to the problems, but we certainly want to work together to solve them. Thanks, everyone.